Have you ever wanted to explore a mountainous abandoned theme park with confusing lore and a demon chipmunk mascot? Well, that's a strange list you've got there, but I think we may have the game for you today. It's called The Park, and apparently it's made by the same developers behind Conan Exiles. Probably should have guessed that. There's a lot of overlap here. When I think burly, shirtless man, my mind often conjures pictures of him just hanging out on a Ferris wheel. However, in this game, they've surprisingly kept the barbarians away in favor of a young woman named Lorraine, a single mother who's attempting to engulf her body in denim. How high are you gonna wear those jeans? Is this fashion now? Lorraine's son is a young boy named Callum, and unfortunately he's lost his stuffed animal, Mr. Bear, in the theme park. My money's that he's been left in a cellar of some description, but fortunately his mother is on the case as she walks over to the gate for our first strange interaction with the toll worker.
Don't blame yourself, Lorraine. People lose things all the time. Take a deep breath and think about the last place you saw your son's teddy bear. Hey, stop! I think your boy just ran into the park. I'll unlock the gates for you.
Firstly, how did Callum get past the gate if it wasn't unlocked yet? Secondly, you're just gonna let us go into the park unaccompanied? I don't know. Seems fishy. Anyway, we follow Callum into the park as we get a tutorial for what is this game's quest marker. Essentially, you press circle to call out for Callum, and he will call back as to guide you via audio where you're meant to go. Then, later in the game, these calls will be accompanied by visual distortions that show you what you're supposed to be doing in order to progress. If only this feature worked in real life. I need money! Unfortunately, I think it's still a little buggy. We follow Callum up the escalator as the world around us begins to shift. Seems night comes on fast and shaky around these parts. Lorraine's a bit confused by the state of the park, but we get a glimpse of our boy who seems to be playing hide and seek. Also, it would seem that they keep the rides on all night long. Saves on electric. I don't know. Well, since they're already on, we may as well see what's going on in the Tunnel of Love.
Near a great forest, there lived a poor woodcutter, his wife and his 2 children. A boy named Hansel and a girl named Gretel.
Probably not the easiest story to get a smooch to, but you gotta work with what you got, fellas. Chipmunk knows what I'm talking about. So yeah, apparently this is just a tunnel of tales. Swan threw me off. Story of my life. We sit through a rendition of this very obscure tale called Hansel and Gretel. Anyone ever heard of it? No idea if this is the original story or not, but it plays out how you probably remember, aside from the ending, where the kids eat the witch. Then on the way out, the swan's like, "Can you believe this shit?" Wait, what were we doing again? Oh yeah.
I'm not playing anymore, Callum.
We continue down the path, finding, I guess, Mr. Bear with a knife in his face, and he hit a pedestrian or something. That Cocaine Bear movie has been such a bad influence on him. You attempt to get over there and give him mouth to snout, but it would seem it's too late. He's snuggling with God now. With nothing left to do, we keep going and eventually find the Octotron. I know my son's missing and all, but there's no lines. What am I gonna do, not ride the rides? Whoa, okay. Maybe I should find it. As we go to do that though, it would seem that Lorraine may not be the doting mother that she appears.
The first time I saw Callum, my thoughts betrayed me. I looked down at this wrinkled, red, bawling thing and I thought, is that it?
She does, however, have a way with words. Not exceptionally nice thoughts, but phrased like flowers at the very least. We find a document, get tapped with a jump scare, and then make our way over to the bumper cars, where interacting with a battery shows a cutscene of God bringing down the thunder. It's 'cause of the jeans, right? He doesn't like them either, I assume. Fortunately, or unfortunately I suppose, it's just a crazed delusion. The bumper car though, that's real. I'm telling you, driverless cars are getting out of control. When AI's made it to backwoods bumpers, we've officially gone too far. Still a few kinks in the programming though, as it misses Lorraine and clears the way towards the Ferris wheel. We decide to take a trip on the wheel. As a single mother, I'd be lying if I said I wasn't hoping to meet a nice hunk of barbarian on here, but unfortunately we're just left with our thoughts. Our bleak, miserable thoughts. Lorraine's taking this opportunity to remember her late boyfriend, Callum's father Don, who fell from this very Ferris wheel while working on it. Don't know if you could get me on a Ferris wheel after a trauma like that, but To each her own. The ride ends, and we head further down the path to find a doll holding a roller coaster ticket. Probably not going to meet the height requirements, so I'll just take that off your hands. Dolly Dearest then uses her telekinesis to clear some brush with Ferris wheel cars. Just don't question it. And we continue our leisurely stroll.
You give up 9 months of your life carrying them, you traumatize yourself giving birth to them, and then you spend the rest of your life as their slave. Wiping asses, mopping up piss, feeding them. Little life-sucking monsters who take and take and take until... we all go insane.
Methinks Lorraine might not be the happiest of parents. On second thought, Callum, you stay in the park. I think I'm just gonna take Mommy on a few more rides and hopefully vent out all that fire. Next stop, roller coaster.
We need to talk about Callum.
What do you mean? What have you done to him?
That's insulting. You and your boy are everything that this place doesn't want. The antithesis of what we stand for.
Where is Callum?
The poor child. He tried so hard to do what he was taught. He even left you a trail of breadcrumbs. But the park is just so hungry.
Too bad even in an abandoned amusement park we can't just be alone with our thoughts, as One Finger Willie decides to interrupt our thrill ride. He tells us that the witch has Callum, and that there's no happy endings, and that we are all alone. We don't really know who this guy is, but that isn't a trustworthy finger. I do not put trust in that digit, I will say that much. Also, the trip is interlaced with scenes of being pushed through hospital doors on a gurney, giving further context to the lightning strike from earlier. With the ride concluded, we head to yet another attraction, this time Sideshow Alley, where we find a dead body. How I miss the days when you and your buddies had to go out of your way to find one of these things along the train tracks. No idea who it is, but Chad was probably the one behind it, considering he's standing right behind you, admiring the craftsmanship. Panicked, we run to the center of the area and find a bottle of pills that Lorraine recognizes as her own and decides to pop one. Or 12. Hell, I don't know. We're tripping balls out here, bro. She closes her eyes and wakes up in Graffiti Plaza before walking out into Headacheburg. One finger blocks the path, so we go the other way, exiting the area as several gashes cut deep into Lorraine's arms. Luckily, it seems that this was all a dream as we stop tripping and our vision clears. This time headed to the House of Horrors as we get another monologue. We enter the worn-down witch's maze, a jump scare paradise, but that's not the impressive part of this creepshow. Behold! Functional mirrors in a video game. You may assume I'm joking. I am not. I spent half my time walking around this place being distracted by the mirrors while jump scares were popping up in the background. I don't know if you guys check mirrors in video games, but they almost never work, so this casual flex did not go unnoticed, Funcom. Anyway, you follow the twisted halls of the scare house before One Finger pops up to sing a children's song and lure Lorraine into the belly of the beast. We follow, finding the hallway leads us into what appears to be our house. Children's paintings dot the walls, intimate documents line the tables, and there's a sink that needs a fixin'. I can relate. We walk around the place for a few minutes, then leave to find the same hallway we came in from. Strange. Following the trail leads to the apartment again. Yes, we're doing one of these things. This time, the documents are a little more bleak, the rooms are a little more disheveled, and Callum is here but doesn't want to be disturbed. Looping back around brings us to the same building again, this time with the drawings vandalized, pill bottles strewn everywhere, and more degrading documents. Another pass brings hanging babies into the mix, a classic, some more documents suggesting that we may have a zoolift problem, and a bloody ice pick in the freezer. Are you tired of this place yet? Well, 5th time's the charm, as this go around, we find the place needs condemned and there's now dead bodies hanging from the ceiling. I think we may have accidentally entered Silent Hill, folks. Fortunately, this is the last pass, as we're let out into the library with Lorraine realizing that she may be the witch. Walking around the place for a few minutes before finding a secret room and Callum lying on a stone slab. Chad's red eyes glowing in the background as One Finger, the multi-chinned menace, assists us in ice-picking our son to death. The whole situation being revealed as some sort of dream, as Lorraine is in the police station talking to a detective, the same man from the information booth at the beginning of the game.
Don't blame yourself, Lorraine. People lose things all the time.
So that's the story. Pretty heartwarming, right? To give some quick thoughts before we go into the explanations, this game is the quintessential walking simulator. To my knowledge, you can't die, there's no puzzles or anything, and your main form of interacting with the world is through the documents. Essentially, this game is just about understanding the story and investing yourself in Lorraine's character and her journey, which, for the most part, I found interesting. The game itself is only around an hour and a half long if you hit all the rides, which makes sense as to why you can constantly find it on sale for $5. Also, it came out in 2015, so it's almost a decade old at this point. As for my thoughts on the story, I like that you end up being the killer in the end. It's a different twist. I like the slow de-evolution of Lorraine as you peel back more and more of the facade through her monologues between the rides. Also, I will say that it's kind of a lukewarm mothering to an alright f*** that kid. I think a little more time would have allowed for it to feel more gradual, but with the limited gameplay mechanics, that probably would have made the game feel too long, so it's a nice balance. Kind of like the apartment section, I think that lasted 1 or 2 revolutions too long. As for the monsters, the most interesting part of any horror game for me, these ones were pretty decent. I don't think you have enough interactions with Chad, he just kind of stands there sometimes, and to be honest, I don't understand the point of him. Then One Finger, who is actually Nathaniel Winter, the founder of this park, was the much more interesting of the two. In the actual game, you can make the association that he's One Finger, but I don't know if it's straight out spelled out for you. As such, by the end of the game, I was kind of under the illusion that this character was just maybe a manifestation of Lorraine's depression or guilt, but no, he's a real character. As for how I know that, allow me to introduce you to another of Funcom's games, The Secret World. Now, I never actually played or even heard of this game, mainly because it was only on PC and I'm in the sacred cult of PlayStation. But this is where Nathaniel Winter hails from, and it was released in 2012. So the park is a tie-in game to that, and I assume this game is meant to serve as kind of a backstory for him. It's also the reason his wiki page is longer than this freaking game. I'm only going to be covering the lore as it pertains to the park though, since the wiki is sourced via nothing, so I can't check the references, and the more I look into the secret world, the more I dig into blocks of text like this. A Scottish mage of impressive power. He had been recruited by the Illuminati at the age of 13 and brought to Solomon Island's Innsmouth Academy in 1864 to be taught how to control his innate gifts. And that's a reference to a person who's not even in this game. He's just the person who owned the land before Winter bought it. So to skip all that and just begin with Winter, he purchases the land that would become Atlantic Island Park sometime in the early 1970s. The locals told him that it was cursed, that the former owner had been a deranged follower of the occult, but for Winter, this was exactly what he was looking for. He'd been driven to the island after hearing tales of this dark presence, and he'd hoped to harness it in a ploy to become an immortal boogeyman. He'd made his money in business, predominantly in venture capital, but his interest in Solomon Island would confuse his associates and onlookers alike. Regardless, his status as a generous philanthropist had paid off, not only with the money, but with connections. Connections he would pull on as he attempted to get this place turned into a theme park. Over the course of the next several years, Solomon Island would undergo heavy construction and see several casualties. Through some kind of magic that's presumably accounted for better in the secret world, Winter had created his rides with the ability to sap away the enjoyment of the riders and somehow transfer those positive emotions to himself, which would in turn be the spark for his immortality. However, getting the rides operational would prove to be a challenge. The workers, perhaps thanks to this dark presence of the island, or feeling the effects of the happiness-stealing machines, had begun dying in record numbers. One of these men would be Dawn, Lorraine's boyfriend. Fortunately for Winter, his former business connections were able to push most of these misfortunes under the rug, and the Atlantic Island Park would be opened in 1977 to much success. He'd created this park, but the whole immortality thing was proving to be another challenge. He was struggling to effectively harness and store the happiness energy he was amassing, and this would force him to dig further into Henderson's journals, eventually finding the answers he sought and getting everything operational for his transformation. For 3 years, he would collect and store this energy until in 1980 an inspection would be performed, and even Winter's lofty connections couldn't stave off a closure. The park had been racking up too many casualties. Ride malfunctions took up the bulk, but there was also a strange employee named Steve who was really getting into character as Chad the Chipmunk. Steve was an underachieving drunkard who had found himself working at the park as its mascot, Chad. Likely thanks to the dark powers that Winters was toying with, he would begin to go insane, embodying the character to the point that he wouldn't take off the suit. Fellow workers of the park would get concerned, but Winter thought nothing of it. In fact, he kinda liked his dedication to the role. That is, until Chad was carving an ice sculpture one day, and a couple of teenagers would mock him. A disrespect that they would pay for in blood. Events such as these would result in the closure of Atlantic Island Park, much to the dismay of Winter. He had his stores of joy, but wasn't positive how to use it to achieve his goals for immortality, sending his wife and son away as he resigned himself to the House of Horrors, locking himself away and attempting to harness that power for his needs. However, it wouldn't be until a group of boys from a local academy would break into the supposedly abandoned grounds that he would see results. He would take one of these children, rushing them underground and tying him to a slab before tickling him into submission. Such a funny yet creepy thing to have happen. You get kidnapped by this fancy old man and he just ties you to a table and tickles you until you can't stand it anymore. Tickling is usually a playful kind of thing too. I don't even know if I can envision a malicious tickling. An interesting concept. Needs more exploration. Anyway, Winter tickles the boy with such ferocity that he manages to kick on his joy machines, which seems to be the catalyst for his transformation into this immortal boogeyman thing. And also, Chad got away from the police, or I don't know. Based on the wiki, Winter's got some kind of pocket dimension thing going on. Which leads us to Lorraine, who is the actual main character of the game and who is a much less reliable narrator, so her story seems to have some holes. Holes that are perhaps filled in by the power of the location's influence, or Winter's alluring magic, or perhaps her burgeoning mental illness. What we do know is that she met her boyfriend Don and became pregnant with his child. 3 months into the pregnancy, he would die while working on the Ferris wheel.
Don and I moved in together, but then, well, he died. According to the supervisor, his safety harness failed when he was working on the top of the Ferris wheel. Don was there one moment, and then gone. Sometimes people leave your life for no reason. I was 3 months pregnant with Callum. Fairy tale fucking over.
Don's death would send Lorraine into a deep depression. Her life had already been rough before she'd met Don. Her father was an alcoholic who took her from her mother when she was little, and her mother for some reason thought Lorraine was in on it. This would give her somewhat of a skewed familial foundation, so when her son Callum was born, Don's death mixed with her long-standing traumas would cause her to resent her son. Based on some of the game's suggestions, like the monologue about her interactions with the sheriff, or her vision of getting zapped by lightning, she would attempt to get treatment for her mental illness, but would be met by painful therapies and a prescription for Zolift or Zoloft. The game's got some grammatical inconsistencies, which I'm going to assume is a feature, and/or Winter's doing. Lorraine would seemingly get addicted to these pills, and her relationship with her son would suffer as a result. Financial burdens wouldn't help much either, as she would return to her old position as a waitress. The mounting pressures of being a mother ever escalating, as Dawn's parents would refuse to help with their grandson, since they had no proof he was Dawn's, and supporting 2 people on her meager income was proving almost impossible. She loved Callum, but stress had begun eating this love as the bills piled up ever higher, and Callum had begun to seem almost like a stranger to her. It would perhaps be these woes that would drive her to the dark presence of the Atlantic Island Park. I don't think we fully know how or why we're here in the first place. At one point she states,
Callum was born the day this place opened. This is his favorite place in the world.
But, I mean, she also says that he was born on the day this place was opened, so he would have been max 3 or 4 when it shut down. Anywho, she follows him into the park where she sees the events unfold from the game. Winter's machines slowly sapping the happiness from her as she makes her way through. The park slowly chipping away the good times of her motherhood, leaving only the bitterness and the difficulties. A process which, in the end, seems to be what causes her to kill Callum. If she even killed him, maybe it was Chad. Who the hell even knows at this point? Look, this game's an hour and a half long, and I feel like I have to take a college course to understand it. It's got some dedicated people on the wiki though. So much to digest, a lot of it coming from a game I don't have. To boil it all away, this is a game about a grieving mother who finds her way to a demon park haunted by a devil man. He preys on the worst part of her fragile mind state and causes her to do something she regrets. The game ending with her in the police station talking to a detective carrying a bee in a jar, who, according to the wiki, recruits her to become a bee-imbued agent of the Council of Venice. Anyway, that's The Park, an interesting little horror game that's got way more going on than I expected. It's not really a game to sink a bunch of time into, but as a tie-in to a grander lore of an MMO, I'll admit that it got me interested in the secret world. I'll probably never play it, but it is still active, which is a feat in and of itself for a game released in 2012. All that being said, thank you all for watching, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope to see you all in the next one.